Okay, so today's training is regarding changelog. And basically what we're going to cover today is how to activate the changelog, how to set up which tables and fields and change types to track in changelog, how to analyze the results that you get from the changelog entries, and how to delete the changelog entries. So Dynamics NAV provides a system to track data changes by user in the database. And to set up changelog, it's helpful to be knowledgeable about Object Designer and the tables and fields within the tables that you wish to track. So most of the people I think that are on this call are familiar with the database structure and tables and fields, but if you don't feel really comfortable with that and it's something that you think somebody else would be better suited to handle, then you might want to share the information with them. But basically, you have to have enough of an understanding of the data that's residing in those tables and fields behind the scenes in order to really set up changelog to work effectively for you. It is suggested that you use the changelog especially for setup tables where data integrity is key, since a change in some of those tables can affect how the system works. So setup tables would be like agencies and receivables setup, inventory setup, general ledger setup, etc. And the first step in setting up the changelog is to identify those tables that you wish to monitor. So you might want to go through and think about what things you feel are important to keep track of, whether it's something that you want to monitor insertions into the table, modifications of the table, deletions in the table, all of them, different things like that. And we'll go through it a little bit more in detail here in a moment. Once you decide on what tables you want to monitor, then you have to figure out what fields, whether you want to track all fields in the table or some fields, and what types of changes are made that you want to track or log. You can log insertions into it, you can log modifications, deletions, all of them, none of them, whatever. And then as part of the decision, you will also need to consider system performance, because changelog does store a lot of information, and the more things you track, then obviously the more space it's going to take up. So one of the things that we will discuss is how to delete changelog entries, and that way we can go ahead and clean up that information as we go. Okay, so we are at the screen where you will go in to set up changelog. And to access it in the navigation pane, you go to Departments, and then Administration, IT Administration, and then it's located under General Setup. And you want to choose the task Changelog Setup, and this brings up the Changelog Setup screen. If you've already activated changelog, then you're going to see a check mark here. And if you haven't yet, then this will be unchecked. And once you're done setting up which tables and fields you want to log, then you would come back and check this box. To get to the tables that you want to log, you click on Related Information, Setup, and then Tables. It takes it a moment to bring up all of the tables in a list view. It takes us to the very last table, and then if you hit Control Home, it'll take you to the top. All right, so as I mentioned before, it shows you all of the different tables that are available in the system to track, and then you can log the insertion of values into the tables and fields, or modifications, deletions, or all of them. And then you can choose to log no fields at all, some fields in the table, or all fields in the table. And a caveat, if you're choosing all fields in a table, just know that it's going to be recording every single change, whether it's an insertion, modification, or deletion that you've chosen to track, into the changelog entry. So it might require that you weekly or even daily run a report to get all the changes that have been done, then delete those entries so that you keep the changelog clear and not taking up too much space. So once you determine whether or not you're going to log that information and what you're going to log, if you choose nothing to log, then there's nothing else to do with that particular table. If you choose all fields, again, there's nothing else to do with that particular table, because it's going to log, in this case, the insertion of every value in that table if you choose all fields. The only time where you have to make additional decisions on the table is if you choose some fields. So in this case, they've selected to log only modifications to the GL account table and only some fields. To get into the fields that have been selected or to choose the fields to select, you right-click and choose the Assist Edit. So again, in order to get there, you have to right-click or you can hit Shift F4. And this opens up the changelog setup field list for the table that you've selected. So currently it's only related to fields in the GL account table. And I will go ahead and expand this column here. And as you can see, the only column that's showing here is log modification, because that's the column that we were in when we went to the Sum Fields menu option. And it shows us which fields have been selected for logging modification of. So in this particular database, we've chosen to log the modification of the number field, the name field, the direct posting value, and this again would be on the GL account. And if we scroll down here, the general posting type, the general business posting group, general product posting group, the fund number and fund value posting. So you can go into a table and choose to only track the log, to log some of the fields in that table. And in order to do that, you have to first choose some fields, then right-click and choose Assist Edit. It will take you into the list of all the fields in that table, and then you can choose which ones you want to track in the changelog. This was just the GL account table, so we'll go ahead and click OK. And we can look at a couple other tables, such as, in this case, it says agency. If it's a non-food bank, this would be the customer table. And here it shows that we've chosen to track some fields. So we'll choose Assist to Edit here. And again, we're tracking the modification of the number and the name field. And here the agency posting group, agency fee group, payment terms, shipment method. So some of the fields that are important enough to warrant tracking whether a modification has occurred since initial setup, shipping agent code, etc. Now you may have more or less that you want to track than what you see here. These are just some examples of how it's been set up in this particular database. So a lot of these fields are not currently being tracked. However, county code, permit web orders, those are being tracked, because that way you can go back and say, okay, this particular agency or customer has been changed for this particular field, and we want to know who did it, when it was done, what the old value was, what the new value was or is, and that way we know if we need to go back to what the old value was, we have that information. So this basically applies to all three columns here. If you notice that as we scroll down, in this particular database, we haven't selected to track the insertion of any tables or the deletion of fields in any tables. However, that may be something that you wish to track. And if I keep going, it's a long list. But you may want to track deletion, you may want to track insertion. It's completely up to you. And once you make those decisions and go in and determine whether you're going to track no fields at all, some fields, or all fields, then once you've done that, you can go close out of the form, and you can come back here and activate changelog. Before I go on, does anybody have any questions about what I've covered so far? You can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can ask me in the chat box. No questions? All right. Okay, so as I mentioned before, once you've completed all the steps, you will close the window and you go back to this changelog setup window and click to activate changelog. And after you've done that, it's going to start tracking whatever you've told it to track. Then when you're ready to view changelog entries, you go to Departments, Administration, and then we'll switch here to Applications. So let me just do a little backup here. Application, oh, I can't type. And then, oops, that's supposed to be application setup and general, which, there we go. And then after that, we go to, boy, I love these little things that tell you where to go, and then it's not exactly the right spot. Let me look at my settings here. Departments, administration, application setup, general. And then lists. And then changelog. And I think there are other ways to get there besides this particular path. So if you can't find the path, you can always type changelog up here in the search box, and it should locate different areas of the application that you can access the changelog. So it's different than changelog setup. This is actually changelog. And I think even if we went back to where we were initially, there was an access to changelog there. For some reason, the instructions pointed us in a different direction, but I think you can access it from that previous spot. So we click on changelog, and it takes us into this window where it shows us all of the entries that have been recorded to changelog based on what we told it to log. And you'll see that it gives us the date and time that the activity occurred. It doesn't matter which activity, based on whether you're logging insertions, modifications, or deletions. It's going to tell you what the date and time was, who the user was, what table the activity occurred in, what the table name is, what the primary key is for that particular value, and the field that the transaction occurred in, or the entry occurred in, what that field name is, because that's a little bit more helpful than the field number. If you want to hide some of the numbers, you certainly can in your column listing, if it's better for you just to look at the field name. And then it'll tell you what type of change occurred. So because we're only tracking modifications, that's all we're going to see in our list. However, if you're tracking insertions and deletions, then you may see a type of change of one of those. And if we scroll to the right, and actually before I do that, I'm going to add something in here. And I'm going to go to choose my columns, and I'm going to put in a freeze pane after the table name. And that way, as we scroll across, we can still see this information to the left of the freeze pane. So we'll scroll over, and we can see the old value. In this particular table, which was table 18, agency, the old value of the county code before this change was KS Johnson, and the new value after the change on this date and time is KS11W. And that way we know, okay, this user, RJB, made a change on that date to this agency table in the FBC county code field. This was the old value that existed in that field before the change, and this is the new value. Another cool thing about this list here, changelog, is that you can filter it. So the default filter was date and time. If I wanted to only see entries that were made between the first of this year and today, I can type in a filter of 0101 through T for today. And now it shows me only the entries that were made in this year, in this particular database. And it shows me the date, who made those changes, what table, what the field is in that, and if we scroll back over here, we'll see more information. So the primary key, oops, scroll that over there, the field number, field name, type of modification or change, and the old and new value. And we can also add additional filters by, if you don't see the advanced filter option right here, you can click on changelog and choose advanced filter, or hit Shift F3, and it will bring up this window here where you can add filters. Now I can remove this date and time filter, and let's say I wanted to filter for user ID and I wanted to filter for a specific table. So I can start with setting a filter by user ID here, and then I can add additional filters by coming down here and choosing additional filters. Let's say I want to go to table name, and I want to see only those changes that were done by CJW user, and in the agency table. And because I chose table name, I can actually type in agency rather than the number. Now I can see all of the entries that were done by this user in this table and what they did and when, and what the old value was and what the new value is. Then if I want to print this information, I can click on the print button up here at the top in the action pane. And if you don't have the print button there, you can add it, or you can go to actions and then print. And once you click on print, you'll notice that it's already included, excuse me, already included my filters. So I don't have to re-enter the filter. So whatever filters I enter here in the changelog entries window will be applied when I go to click print. And I'm just going to choose preview, but if you wanted to, you could print this and send it to, you can send it to Excel, or you can store it in a PDF format, however you want to. If I want to send it to Excel or save it as Excel or a PDF file, I can do it right here. But it shows me that information that I just saw in the changelog entries window in a print format. And that way I can go ahead and print this. And then later, if I want, I can go back and delete that information. So it's no longer stored in the table, but I have a record of what happened, when it occurred, who did it, what the old value was, what the new value is. And that way I can go back and make changes to revert the information in the database if necessary. So again, I can set filters here by using advanced filters, or if I just want to set a single filter, I can do it up here in the top filter entry window. And then once I've created that set of records, then I can print them, and I can even then go and delete them if I want. Before I go to show you how to delete, does anybody have any questions about how to view the changelog entries or how to filter the changelog entries? You guys are too easy. Okay, hopefully somebody's chuckling back there. I can't hear you, but I'm just going to assume that you are. As I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you are aware that the data can grow very quickly in the changelog entries table if you set it up on perhaps fields that are modified often or inserted into often if you're tracking insertions. So you want to just be careful, and if you are tracking fields that get updated frequently, that you come in and check to see how big your changelog entries are getting, and perhaps schedule times where you're going to go in and delete the entries. So, if you track certain fields, and depending on the type of tracking that you're doing, it's possible that you'll fill the table with hundreds or even tens of thousands of records. So, once you find that you're getting a lot of records in your changelog entries table, you can go periodically and delete entries in that table. And there are a few tables that can become really big in Dynamics NAV, and it's expected that our ledger entries are going to grow as time passes. But a lot of times, if you're tracking a lot of information in the changelog entry table, that one will tend to grow out of proportion. And it may not have been known that you can actually delete changelog entries to recover lost space. Okay, question was asked. Will setting up changelog impact your system performance, assuming we clean out the changelogs frequently? If you track a lot of fields and a lot of tables in the changelog entry table or changelog table, then yes, it can impact system performance. However, if you are aware of how much it's actually using, then you can determine whether you need to clean it up daily or weekly or monthly. Or maybe you'll consider tracking less of the information. If it becomes a little too crazy, you may want to start tracking less information. If you're looking through the changelog entries and you think, you know what, this isn't something we really need to track anymore, then you can start unchecking those fields, assuming that you're either using some fields, or if you're using all fields in a table, you may want to decide to just go to some fields and not track every single field in a particular table. So when you first start using changelog, that's something that you'll have to try and get an idea of what you want to do. Can you export the table from this screen? So let's say we went back here and cleared this out. I don't think you can from this screen, Donna. I think you actually have to print it. But if we wanted to take out all of our filters and then let's go back here and clear it. If we take out all of our filters and then click on print and then preview, then, oh, did I not? I must not have gotten rid of everything. Let's see here. It looks like I did, but still has my filter for CJ. That's funny. It didn't clear my filters in the report. So then I can click on preview. And once I have it in preview format, then I can export this to Excel. Yes, if you're using Classic, that is very true. You can just go into the table and paste the fields after you applied all your filters in the table, and then you can copy and paste them into Excel. So you have the option. You can either do it from RTC and run the report first and then export it to Excel, or as Josh mentioned, you can go into Classic, run the table. So for those of you that you know are used to accessing it in Classic, we can go in here and let's just choose the table here, or choose the right license here first. Hate it when I click the wrong thing. So we'll go into Object Designer and then Table. Didn't have find as you type on, so it didn't find it. So you'll see in Classic we've got the changelog setup table, the changelog setup field, and changelog entry. So changelog entry is the one that you would want to run and set your filters on. And then once you set the filters, you can export that information, or I should say copy and paste it in Excel. So you can run it from here. Basically, we're now seeing all the entries that we saw in RTC, but we're seeing them here. It gives us the entry number, date and time, etc. And then you can apply filters, setting your either table filters or field filters. And then once you set those, then you can copy by clicking up here and right-clicking and choose copy, and then pasting into Excel. So thank you, Josh, for that tip for those of you that like to use the Classic version. And if you're not using Classic or don't have access to Classic, you can do the same thing by just running the changelog entries, either setting no filters if you want all records, or setting filters and then printing, or preview, I should say previewing the report, and then you can choose Save as Excel. Okay, so back over to RTC. Once you've determined how often you need to clean up the changelog entries, you can delete them directly from the table if you want. However, you may wish to do it by running the delete changelog entries routine, because that way you can make sure that you're filtering properly, because once you've done it, they're gone, unless you have a backup of the database and you can go back and get them from a prior backup. Excuse me, had to take a sip of water there. So to delete the entries, what you want to do is you want to go to Administration and then IT Administration. We'll see how well I can type this time. And then Data Deletion and Delete Entries. Whoop. And then you'll see delete changelog entries under tasks. And obviously if I go back one level, so then it took us back here and we could choose from delete entries and then delete changelog entries. So this will bring up the changelog delete window. And here you can set the filters for what you want to delete in the changelog. So if we wanted to delete only the entries that were made by a particular user, we can do that. So I can say I want to delete entries made by myself. And let's say I only want to delete entries that were made to a specific table. I can either do it by table number or table name. So I want to only delete those made to the agency table. And I want to only delete those, in this case, made to field name, FBC, county code. Now you could choose the field number if you wanted to get this specific about what you're deleting. I just chose to use the name instead. So I click OK, and it says you have not defined a date filter. Do you want to continue? So it's basically warning me it's going to delete every single instance where it's got user ID CJW in the agency table in the field FBC county code, regardless of what date. So the default answer there is no. So if you just hit enter, it won't do the deletion. It just wants to remind you that you haven't selected a date filter. So you can do deletions without selecting a date filter, or you can do it simply by date. So if you wanted to delete everything older than a certain date, you could do ... and then the date that you want to delete up to. And that way it will only delete records prior to that date. So I choose yes to continue, and it tells me 0 entries were deleted. So I obviously did something wrong because I thought there were some entries in there that met that criteria. So we'll do this instead. We will choose this, and then we'll say only those entries. I think there were some entries in the month of January, so we'll say 01 through 01/31. And maybe because I don't think it has anything to do with me typing that incorrectly, and let's just make sure we don't have any other filters on here that I didn't see. Okay, that looks good. Well, it's telling me that 0 entries were deleted again. Obviously, I didn't test this part of it before. Let's go back and take a look at the changelog entries. And let's filter for date and time of 01/01 through 01/31. And it didn't find anything. So obviously I was wrong about my date and time. So we'll set the filter to user ID and then CJW. And okay, so it looks like the first one in 2014 was 3/31, and that was to a different field in the table than FBC county code, although I didn't filter for that when I was doing the second one by date. But if we go back now and let's say we filter for everything prior to December of 2013, we should delete 2 records. So we'll go back in here and we'll choose up through 11/30/13 for user ID CJW. Now, you may not get that specific when you're doing your deletions. You might just be doing it by date and time, but just for purposes of this example, we will choose this filter. So it says your date filter allows deletion of entries that are less than 1 year old. Do you want to continue? So it's giving you a couple warning reminders as you're doing the deletions just to make sure that you're okay with the selections that you've made. So I'm going to say yes. And now it tells me 2 entries were deleted, which is accurate. Now they still show up in this form because it hasn't refreshed yet. So I'm going to just go back here to General Setup and then go back into Changelog. And then I'm going to go back and filter for CJW again. And now those 2 entries are gone. So if you happen to do it in RTC and you're viewing the changelog entries at the same time and you don't see them disappear, it's just because it needs to refresh that form. So make sure that you either back out of it and come back in to see the changes, or if you're doing it in Classic, you should see the deletion right away if you're doing it from the table. So are there any questions about, one other thing I wanted to mention. Before you actually delete entries, this is made on the assumption that you don't have any modifications that were built on top of the generic changelog. So if you have any modifications to changelog, so if we go back over, and I think I closed out of Classic, but we'll go back in. If you've got modifications on any of your changelog tables, you may want to check either with us or whoever did the modifications first to make sure that it would be okay to delete the entries. So let's go back and set our license here. And if we go back and look at those tables, you'll notice these are all base Navision tables, NAV 6.0. So if yours don't have an additional tag on them with like a version for your food bank or your company, then it would be safe to delete entries in the changelog table. But if you do have any modifications, then you may want to check with us first. Another thing that I wanted to mention too is that if you are running the delete changelog entries routine, you want to make sure, because it's possible that this could take a long period of time depending on what changelog entries you're deleting, because there's potential for a lot of data in the table, and depending on how frequently you're deleting the data, you may have a lot of data to delete, so it could take a while for it to run. So you want to make sure that you schedule the deletion at a time when there's either no one on the system or very few people on the system, and that you're not deleting anything that would affect what they're currently doing. And if deleting changelog entries with the default report takes a long time, then you might want to look at the possibility of using a function for the changelog entry table from SQL Server Management Studio to truncate the table. And for that, I don't really have any information because I'm not a SQL Server expert. But if you're not familiar with what to do to create a truncate table function, then you can check with one of our developers and we can get that information for you. All right, any questions about any part of it that we've gone over so far? So if there's anything you want a repeat of or anything you want more detail on, just let me know.
It all seems pretty straightforward. This is a good demonstration.
Great, excellent. That's good to hear. All right, well, everybody have a great rest of the day and week, and look forward to seeing you at the next training. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Connie.
You bet. Bye-bye.